The library comes equipped with one lavish piece of furniture. You do not find lavish things elsewhere in the library, but the library acquisition specialist has known no other world than this. They know only this town, this library and its machinations, its twisting, absurd hallways. Not enough to make MC Escher proud, but still so much a place and time that seems different from the rest of the lighter world outside, foreign to it. For a long time it was hard to accept, the librarian remembers. But there was nowhere else to go. No road that would allow them any passage to anywhere beyond the city limits. However, there were books. Books were enough of an escape. And there was plenty to be done, truly. Organizing, sorting, faking a smile at passers-by or citizens that felt compelled to come to the library for whichever reason, and usually were seen again by another. When did the murders begin? They have to think, honestly. It's so hard to remember the first, when there have been so many after. The librarian, who does not remember their true name, but allows other people to call them Jeffrey when pressed, is less a murderer due to sadism, and more to just the nature of life and captivity. They do not know why they sign their blood portraits with those 4 letters. Who has ever had a name like Mace? Perhaps it is an acronym, they think to themselves, of the one who reaches deep inside and compels them. Perhaps it is the name of a god, or organization of gods, who pulls Jeffrey through life. They do not like the name Jeffrey, but there are so many things they do not like. The name Jeffrey seems such a small thing to hate. They cannot say either why this captivity in the library, why they are an unjust minotaur. They cannot think of a crime they committed before the murders, and it's not as though there's a police force to stop the murders. No, the police in this Surf City are more of a convenience helper, keeping Surf City's sidewalks and streets so pleasant. It is neither difficult, by the same token, to find bodies looking to be severed from their physical connections, the glint of the knife in their hand, the sharp silver of it that makes them think as they plunge the dagger into the graceful line of the neck. They wonder why people don't make more sounds. They wonder so much. Perhaps it's the same reason why tigers are given frozen watermelons in summer at zoos, or so the librarian has heard. There is so little thrill with it. Is it not the duty of a god to use a physical vehicle for their own thoughtfulness? The first body was hardest for this Jeffrey, this specialist, because they didn't know what to do with it as it dropped. They knew it was important for some reason, but they didn't know what was important about it or what to save. It laid there for an hour, and they sat with it, cross-legged, looking at the fallen form and hearing the barest chirp of crickets as though in a faraway tunnel. They fell asleep and awoke in their own bed, their small bed squeezed into the corner of a room tucked just beneath a staircase near historical romance. The second body was brought back with great dragging force to the library, dumped at the front door, and the skull and the severed neck tendons taken up a little round staircase to the library acquisition specialist's private study, where not even their head lay, but artistic desire does. They barely had enough of a scrap of a canvas then, the tiniest sliver of bare off-yellow wallpaper, paper that could barely absorb the blood. It was too thick, too juicy, too carnivorous. It took 4 bodies in order to understand. And then this Jeffrey began to paint, once they understood. They painted a dragon, an overpass of a bridge with an encampment beneath it, a whole series of just bubbles, all in red. Lately there's a woman in red. She has long hair, like if Jeffrey had long hair. The same kind of bone structure, and Jeffrey often layers the blood, letting one part of the structure dry to black darkness before adding on just the right touches of fresher blood to give the cheeks sharpness. The night they finished, when the mermaid came to life and it spoke, Geoffrey's whole chest convulsed with a sort of absurd pleasure. Save her. That was all the voice said. Even after Geoffrey drew in eyes, the blood for the eyes came from an arm of someone that had given blood. The library hadn't wanted a head that time. That was different. Arm sinew is different from neck sinew. Save her. Geoffrey didn't know who her was, or why they kept writing the same 4 letters over and over again in the same order as if a signature. But that couldn't be. That wasn't their name. They didn't think. Oh, it was something that was right there, but Geoffrey couldn't put it together. It was a puzzle with 3 pieces that didn't connect to anything. Geoffrey knew Julie Cumberland was different. They couldn't say exactly what made her different, but she walked more solidly. She had purpose. She sought knowledge instead of just showing up. Her knowledge was not jealous in the way of Mary Margrave's knowledge. She was not the Julie Cumberland they'd grown up with, but she was Julie Cumberland. That was clear. Save her. Geoffrey had been thinking about the duel since it happened, and now a week, or 2 weeks, or a month had passed, however time did so, since so little seemed to change in Surf City, and they'd traced the event in their mind, over and over, sitting opposite of the poor shooter, which surprised the librarian, considering how there was so little in Surf City to aim for. So that's how Geoffrey came to a little house near another little house, and tapped on the window, knife in the cuff of their jacket, hemmed for such a purpose as ease of use. They knocked with tiny knocks, almost the same kind of scratching that a cat would at a door. No howls, but also no lights in response. No movement. Nothing at the window. Why were they not home? Why come here and they are not home? Geoffrey thought for a moment, waited, listened, began walking. The chapel. They'd never been in. There wasn't a reason to be there. No ceremony, no moving ode to anything that required a library acquisition specialist. It nearly frightened them at this hour. Not midnight, no, not yet, but creeping there, like a vine, a dark green vine. And then the man that Geoffrey had come for. This was always the same. More a series of vignettes than of the reality of the situation. A snapshot. The man's back, hidden by some layers of clothing, given no sense of muscle definition. His neck wasn't particularly thick, but did seem a little longer to Geoffrey than most. For a second, it seemed as though the man's neck might twist around and the head would come to bear on Geoffrey's position. Light footfalls. Light breathing. There was a key in the man's hand, and then for a moment it hovered in the air, unfettered. As the body hit the ground, Geoffrey plucked the key daintily from the air and silently observed a change in the universe. There was a shed. Was there always a shed? What a strange thing. A strange place. There had been a brick wall a moment ago. Geoffrey left the body there and unlocked the shed door with a click. At the same moment, the eyes opened on the creature in the town dump. They flickered and almost seemed to gasp, as if inhaling through the pupils. They looked around, frantically, absorbing things as if a newborn. And Michael Charles Taffet breathed out in admiration of himself. He'd named it Thursday. For a brief moment it had been SPARK, an acronym, a flight of fantasy and fancy, in capital letters, uppercase. It was not the spark, but it was a spark, a modern Promethean discovery, that same shiver, those same taboo goosebumps. And then Thursday came into his mind and shut out other words until he could only gaze at the might of Thursday as it began to live. Michael Charles Taffet flung away empty cartons of ice cream and soda, and all the junk and grease from a drafting table he'd patched together in the town dump. He left there atop the table, paper, blank and white, and began scribbling, shouting, dancing around the room. Thursday did not shiver. It did not moan, nor was there an indication that it would. It was beyond the heartbeat stage. There was now brain activity, waves, the ability to learn and to remember. This success would bring the second part of the plan to bear. One of the women who watched the water tower, believing it to be a sentient dark god, fell to her knees and wept. The force of the sobs left a wordless bubble in her throat, and her tongue began to cascade blood in gentle drops, as though her vocal cords themselves were trying to escape her body. The blood drops fled upwards towards the sky. She was found the next morning with the body of Greengrass. She had crawled her way to the town square where he had been dropped, decrepit and wholly deflated now. Two bodies, far apart, more distant than cold lovers, and on the ground, written and dried in the motions of the rivers of their blood. Who is she? The center S, in black and red, centered right over the founding brick, sanctified by Our Lady in green as the first stone lain from the four families. Varick O'Mare orgasmed at the back of the crowd for the first time in 5 years. Impure thoughts about nothing in general and the shape of everything caused him to stumble backwards, and he slowly ran until he fell in the chapel garden into a dead sleep for 2 days' time, unmoved by any who stumbled upon his breathing yet comatose body, deeply sunken into the rich black earth. And somewhere, in another universe, Ben awoke. Surf City is an audio work of John MacDonald and John MacDonald Productions. It is meant for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to advise anyone on lifestyle, health, or spiritual/philosophical issues of their or any time. All opinions expressed are held by the characters, and in some cases the creator of Surf City and Surf City Donuts, John MacDonald. Season 2's cosmic narrator is Jack Wyckes.